Last year, we couldn't go 5 seconds of television without getting one of these thrown in our face. Last year, we couldn't watch 5 minutes of League Pass without getting one of these thrown in our face. They couldn't go to commercial break without throwing one of these in our face.
The WNBA has been thrown into a storm so massive, no one in leadership ever saw it coming. For years, league officials leaned heavily on media powerhouses like Disney, using ESPN and ABC as a stabilizing anchor, while Amazon stepped in as the flashy new streaming partner that gave them modern credibility. But here's the shocking turn. What started as quiet murmurs of instability has now erupted into full-scale alarms. Reports suggest both Disney and Amazon are actively reconsidering their commitments, threatening to scale back drastically or even abandon future broadcast deals altogether. Without those essential partnerships, the league faces losing not only critical exposure, but also the massive cash flow that has quite literally kept it alive.
No Caitlin Clark. These companies wipe their hands of the WNBA. They're not gonna put time, they're not gonna put effort, they're not gonna put money.
And get this, fans who once saw commercials, highlight reels, and feature spots everywhere are now noticing a sudden and deafening silence. The big question isn't whether Caitlin Clark alone can keep the league alive anymore. It's whether the entire WNBA can even survive without those heavyweight corporate allies behind it. And the truth? That answer may turn out to be far more brutal than anyone working inside the league is ready to face.
Other than a Nike commercial, other than a Gatorade commercial, how many commercials have you seen of companies putting WNBA players as the face of their commercial? I can't think of one.
When we talk about whether pro sports can last long-term, the first thing that always comes up is broadcast rights. In today's sports economy, TV contracts aren't some extra perk. They're the bedrock holding everything together. Think about it. The NFL, NBA, even MLB. Billions pour in because networks know people will watch in droves. That cash doesn't just cover player salaries. It fuels sponsorships, ensures constant visibility, and makes the league impossible to ignore. But here's where the WNBA is different. For years, it's relied on Disney through ESPN and ABC just to get games in front of casual fans. The hope was simple. Exposure would eventually lead to real traction. But that's also where the cracks became visible. Last season, Caitlin Clark burst into the spotlight, handing the WNBA its first real taste of mainstream buzz in ages. ESPN jumped at the chance, rolling out endless highlight packages and hyping every Indiana Fever matchup she was part of.
That CarMax commercial, they ran that all Caitlin Clark's senior year at Iowa. They ran that all through the draft. They ran that all through last year. They ran that all through this year's draft. But we haven't seen it since Caitlin Clark has been down.
And let me tell you, those numbers weren't just an improvement. They were historically unprecedented for the league. Viewers who had never once tuned in suddenly started paying attention. Ticket prices soared, jersey sales skyrocketed, and, believe it or not, WNBA broadcasts began outranking other established sports. It finally felt like the league had turned a corner. But here's the twist. That spike wasn't the result of broad, league-wide interest. It was tied almost completely to Clark. And when she suffered a season-ending injury, ratings collapsed almost instantly. Games that had drawn over 1 million viewers dropped to a few 100,000. ESPN, which had been dedicating entire segments on First Take and SportsCenter to Clark's highlights, suddenly had little to say about any other matchup. Once again, the WNBA faded into obscurity on mainstream sports coverage, unless Clark was on the court.
WNBA players are back to being ignored by corporations and companies. They're back to being in obscurity. With Caitlin Clark, rising tide lifts all boats, and she was the tide that lifted them all.
The momentum completely collapsed. And guess who caught on right away? The corporate backers. Disney, for instance, doesn't invest in sports that can't guarantee steady viewership. For them, the WNBA was supposed to be a long-term statement, a mix of brand alignment and inclusivity messaging, all while keeping advertisers engaged. But here's the cold reality. Advertisers don't buy into feel-good narratives. They buy into audience numbers. And the moment Clark was sidelined, the buzz evaporated. Those $1 million ad slots tied to WNBA broadcasts instantly lost a huge chunk of their value.
Ticket sales from $89 per ticket prior to Caitlin Clark's season-ending injury.
So when ticket prices nosedived by 30%, dropping to an average of just $62, that's when whispers started that Disney might not renew its deal at all. Amazon, on the other hand, entered women's basketball because streaming platforms are desperate for live events, one of the last forms of programming people still watch in real time. But here's the problem. Amazon runs on numbers. If their broadcasts don't produce, they won't hesitate to pull their funding.
Let's talk about some of these ratings real quick. Fever Mercury from last Tuesday, 310,000. Fever Mystics from last Sunday, 270,000. The Fever Mystics on NBA TV got outdrew by women's college volleyball on the Big Ten Network. Oh boy. Wing Sparks, the game right after, 130,000. And the finale between the Sky and the Aces did 90,000 views.
Reports are already circulating that Amazon executives are reviewing whether the WNBA generates enough return to justify the expense. And if Disney backs out while Amazon does the same, the league wouldn't just lose some exposure, it would lose its single most important lifeline. And honestly, this would only mark the start of a bigger collapse, because the ripple effect extends far beyond TV contracts. Sponsorship deals, advertising partnerships, and the league's broader relevance all hinge on that broadcast safety net. Without it, the rest of the system starts to crumble.
That goes into why they held off so long in announcing Caitlin Clark's season-ending injury, because they knew people would stop showing up. They knew the excitement and the interest would wind down.
Now let's focus on the clearest warning sign of how unstable the WNBA situation really is. And you see it directly in the advertising. Commercials aren't filler space. They're the clearest evidence that corporations believe in a product enough to invest millions to attach their brand to it. Just last season, you couldn't turn on ESPN or League Pass without seeing back-to-back spots starring WNBA talent. Aja Wilson was plastered across CarMax ads. Sabrina Ionescu showed up in State Farm skits. Sue Bird had a seemingly permanent place in promos. These weren't just about cars or insurance. They symbolized the idea that the WNBA was climbing, but that image, it's already fading. With Clark injured and ratings tanking, many of those very commercials have disappeared. CarMax hasn't launched fresh campaigns. State Farm, once eager to highlight Liberty stars nationwide, has scaled back significantly. Fans who used to joke about memorizing every line of those ads can't even remember the last time they saw one. That's no accident. Corporations follow momentum, and right now, the WNBA doesn't have it. Take Paige Buchers, for example. Her commercial isn't running during ABC primetime sports anymore. Instead, it's buried on League Pass, visible only to the small base that already follows women's basketball. That's not national reach, that's containment. And while everyone talks about growth, the truth is that most sponsors won't invest outside Clark's spotlight. When she's absent, the ad money evaporates. This is where Disney and Amazon begin to worry. If advertisers are already pulling their dollars, why would networks continue handing over valuable airtime? Broadcasting WNBA games without sponsor revenue isn't just unprofitable, it guarantees losses. ESPN depends on ad money to survive. And when commercials vanish, network executives don't see progress or diversity. They see financial emptiness. The vanishing of those CarMax and State Farm campaigns is a red flag, proof that the hype wasn't true league-wide growth, but temporary corporate signaling tied directly to Clark's buzz. Worse yet, it sends the wrong signal to casual fans. Last year, the saturation of commercials made the WNBA feel mainstream. This year, the silence paints the opposite picture. Out of sight, out of mind. Without consistent advertising, casual fans forget, and when they forget, viewership plummets. Players can talk publicly about progress, but behind the scenes, corporations are already pulling out. Disney and Amazon may be the biggest names applying pressure, but once the sponsors dry up, networks won't be far behind. And if networks leave, the WNBA risks losing its entire platform. That's when real panic sets in. But advertising is just one piece of this unraveling puzzle, because the next major crack comes from the ratings collapse without Clark to keep the numbers alive.